Welcome to Disambiguation. I'm your host, Michael Fauscette. Each week, we interview experts in artificial intelligence, generative AI, and business automation to help business leaders understand how to use these tools for the biggest business impact. Our show today is Red Teaming AI, Catching Vulnerabilities Before Hackers Do. I'm joined by the two founders of Silmaril.dev, and Eduardo. Welcome, guys.
Thank you for having us. It's a pleasure, Michael.
Yeah,
Very
this will
excited to be
be
on.
this will be a fun conversation. I think I haven't done anything on around security and AI in a while. I've written a few things around it, but so I think this is a topic that a lot of people are really curious about. Why don't we start by just giving us a little bit of background of each of you and tell us a little bit about Silmaril and what you're doing.
For sure. So we're building Silmaril, which is an open source framework to red team Gen AI applications. And start off about me. So I was an ML researcher early on in high school, published a paper on applied ML, went to Columbia University, got my major in computer science, and left to work at Amazon. I was on the Elastic Container Service team, where I built their security slash compliance framework before some pretty big audits. And I came to the very obvious realization now that security is not a solved problem. So with Gen AI coming up, like the attack surface is just getting more dynamic and broader. So decided to leave Amazon and partner with Eduardo to build Silmaril.
Yeah, so a little bit about me. I majored in math in college, and I worked with a professor on a brain imaging software project. From there, I knew that building software was my passion. After college, I was at an e-commerce startup for 2 years, and then I was at Amazon for 5. There, I built machine learning recommendation systems for the homepage and the mobile app. And most recently was designing agentic experiences around things like product curation and shopping research. So I personally experienced how challenging it is to keep these agents running securely and reliably. So I decided to team up with Ohm and take on this problem head on.
Nice. Well, so I just to dig in a little bit, one of the things that I've seen from startup founders is that sort of aha moment when you go, "Ooh, there's a hole in the market, and I have an idea." So, is there something that you guys point to, like what particular security breach, vulnerability you witnessed, and made you think, like, "Hey, we need to solve this problem"?
It wasn't really, I'd say, a single aha moment. It was more a continuous push over a short
Mm,
amount of time for us. So when we were at Amazon, early 2024, we really saw a lot of these AI systems start to affect the way human labor was organized. So we had these project planning GPT wrappers. Our own coworkers were starting to use ChatGPT to make task plans
mm,
and write design docs. And it seemed like this was getting into our personal and professional lives in pretty much every aspect. So
yeah,
we had this like nagging feeling that, hey, the blast radius is really large. Something is bound to happen given the way people are using it pretty unrestricted. Um, but we didn't think too much of it. Um, we just kind of kept an eye on it for a bit. We started talking with a lot of executives in the area just to learn a bit more about how they saw security in AI. And we were honestly kind of shocked.
mm,
They would come up with very crazy horror stories, or even just talk about their projects that were stuck in pilot. Um, so it started to seem like security was a bottleneck for even improving customer
mm,
experience on their products. So after that point, we realized that maybe there's something here that we should look into. Um, I'd say what is the closest to an aha moment for us is after that, in October of 2024, a paper called Hijack RAG came out.
mm,
And that's kind of the big vulnerability that we had been predicting, and it came to
mm,
fruition. It was a systemic vulnerability in the whole RAG architecture. So
mm,
this would affect like big companies and small companies alike, which is pretty catastrophic. And we realized that this is just the beginning of these systems. We're still learning them and we're still building with them. So there's more to come with these types of
mm.
vulnerabilities. And we just left Amazon and decided to go in full time after that.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the risk is always interesting to watch. You see your side of it, but you don't really think about the fact that you've built automation tools that are just great for the hackers that are trying to get in, and they can continue to bang on your systems in a lot of different ways that maybe you didn't really think through. So I know you guys. A lot of tools focus kind of in the older perspective around static scans or guardrails or frameworks, compliance, issues. How are you guys different? I mean, what's unique, and what unique value do you have that you bring to your customers that we haven't seen in this cybersecurity space before?
Yeah, that's a great question and is exactly how we feel. So we feel AI security companies are using a bit of an outdated mental model where these
Mm,
things like static model artifact analysis, basic block listing, uh, basic compliance configurations for certifications are the norm. But
mm,
then these new systems that are emerging are human-like and they're not deterministic, and that requires adapting our approach toward that. So this only gets worse when we start going beyond just
mm,
LLMs into agentic systems. So we treat every component of an agentic workflow like a part of a dynamic attack surface. And that includes things like a supervisor agent that's delegating tasks, maybe a shared memory store that the agents are working off of, external agents from other systems, and so forth. And we test that using a realistic adversarial approach
mm,
that pulls off these sophisticated and kind of chained attacks. The benefit for our customers is twofold. So, primarily, they can start moving away from these binary checklist type of
mm,
test suite into something that is more grounded in how real attackers operate. And because of that, they have more trust in their security posture. And it
mm,
leads into the second benefit, which is they have more provable security that allows them to speed up their procurement process. And both as they're looking to adopt new AI tools and as they're looking to sell their AI
mm.
experiences.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean that's it's such a different and new landscape to think about, and especially the response to and the quickness of how quickly you can have a vulnerability develop and be taken care of, taken advantage of, and your response is at human speed. You've got a problem, right? Because if it's at agentic speed, whoosh, right, it's so much faster, so much more risk, right? So I was curious. I was looking through your site, and I know you had some interesting case studies, and so I was you went through those, and I know you referenced one of them, critical vulnerabilities in some well-known AI copilots, and assistants, copilots have been around now for a couple of years, and they are being used quite a bit by businesses. But without calling out the actual companies, what patterns do you see across the AI industry in terms of security gaps? Or are companies rushing into the deployment of AI tools, but they aren't really providing the adequate security planning considerations that they need to protect themselves?
One of the patterns that we're seeing is that these security tests that are the norm in the
Mm,
industry are shallow, and it leads into a sort of security theater where teams are showing results that look good on
mm,
reports, maybe gives them some sense of false confidence, but it's actually not reflecting how real attackers operate. So when
mm,
companies are relying on things like static model analysis, basic prompt guardrails, basic PII redaction, they
mm,
miss how these low severity issues can be chained to achieve something that is
mm,
catastrophic. For example, a prompt shield might treat a model returning a response using Markdown as safe, but in a web context, rendering markdown images is actually a very common avenue for zero-click
Mm,
data exfiltration.
hmm,
Now, agentic systems only make this problem worse, and we see situations where they're collaborating and outputs from agents are being treated as trusted, when in reality, every single connector, every single handoff, every single relayed message should be scrutinized and also tested against in an
mm,
adversarial way. So we want to help teams focus on testing, moving basically their process from something that is report friendly to something that is
mm,
a realistic demonstration of security.
hmm. Yeah, that's
Adding on to
interesting. I
that,
mean, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
oh, yeah, I was just gonna add on to that. We were, yeah, we'd love to show you like a real like video or demo, but we want to be a bit responsible in terms of disclosing this. So we'll talk with you offline. Maybe there's like a YouTube video we can put up, or a link to a case study we can give you
Sure.
if people want to learn more. We also think that the companies they're rushing to deploy, but they're also rushing to build, and that really
Mhm,
shows. So most of these case study or most of these pilots are pretty much stuck at these companies, and we've talked with like dozens of executives. From our conversations, around half of them were stuck in pilot for two reasons. One, they just weren't adding enough value, and two was they weren't confident in their security, which is kind of
mm,
surprising because these are very savvy people. And when I think like almost 2 or 3 days ago, the MIT research paper came out saying that
yeah.
95% of all AI products are stuck in pilots. That was kind of a even more drastic statistic.
Mm,
But in the rare scenario that we do see these tools be deployed to the public, um, security is still an afterthought. And the fact that we could find vulnerabilities in big name companies like the Microsofts, Googles, ChatGPTs, and Claudes within 2 days of even knowing about the tool shows that this is true at pretty much any level of sophistication.
mm,
So our hypothesis here is a lot of these companies are taking two trade-off approaches. One, let's make the system more constrained, not give it as much autonomy, and as a result of that, not have as much utility for the customer. Or two, put the security burden on the customer. We'll have a disclaimer
mm,
and we'll let the customer decide what's true and what's not. And either way, this is just harming the customer. We
mm.
want to help people actually have trust in these AI systems. So that's kind of why our whole approach is let's make security something you're doing while you're building.
Mm. Yeah, that definitely resonates. I saw that MIT study, and it's an interesting one because I also just finished a survey a couple months ago about AI adoption, and the numbers on the other side are also staggering, right? So, 95% of the projects are at risk, or they're not getting out of pilot phase. But at the same time, I see almost 90% of the companies I surveyed, they were all US based, were already doing agentic AI in some way. So either planning the project, our proof of concept, all the way to full enterprise deployment. And in fact, almost, well, over 50% were doing something in full production. It may have been limited or whatever, but full production. So the risk is much higher perhaps than we've thought, because of the fact that we have in fact moved quickly into these deployments, but maybe, as you say, we haven't put the right security approaches in place to constantly examine what's happening in your systems and make sure. I mean, agentic AI is one of those weird things that has tentacles everywhere, right? And the more you connect it, the more valuable it is. The more it's connected, though, also the more risk you have, right? So it's an interesting one. Now, I know you guys are using some agents as well. So, can you talk a little bit about what you're doing with autonomous red teaming agents? What do they do that perhaps a human security tester might not find, might miss?
Yeah, so the short answer is scale and coverage. So humans are very good at being creative and thinking
Mhm,
intuitively and using this to come up with sophisticated attacks. The
mhm,
problem is looking for these attacks that chain vulnerabilities at different layers and
mhm,
analyzing them in context. It's basically a brute force search in a
Mm,
combinatorial space that involves all of the different variables and the different options that an attacker or a user might have when interacting
mm,
with these systems.
mm,
That's anything from every input that they can have into the model, including things like different languages, different character encodings, and so forth. Um, every integration, docs, calendars, different types of model artifacts at the very least,
mm,
fast versus reasoning, and then how the output is rendered as well. A lot of these have conveniences to render graphs, charts, widgets. They can run code. They can
mm,
preview apps, even build full apps
mm.
sometimes. And all of that just makes the blast radius much, much bigger.
Yeah.
On top of that, there's also the non-determinism aspect of AI. So attacks might succeed only, let's say, 10% of the time. And that
Mm,
leaves security operators having to do these things over and over and over just to have confidence in their system security. So
mm,
that's where an autonomous agent shines. So
mm,
AI is quite good at natural language processing, which facilitates the crafting of these escalating, natural sounding, realistic attacks. And it's
mm,
also really good at large scale data analysis, which helps with the
mm,
analyzing the impact of a threat in the context of an attack. At
mm.
the end of the day, we really want to empower operators to cover more ground through their testing, not replace them, and be more
Mm,
confident in their security procedures.
mm. Yeah, so it's not really just speed, which I mean, obviously speed's a thing and it's important in the process, but it sounds like it's this breadth of capability that you can get to that a human just would have. It would take too long, or it would just be such a broad spectrum of different things to deal with that you really can't get to the completeness that you need when you're talking about an agentic system unless you're using an agent to actually run this and scale this and really provide that complete um, feeling of trust that you need to really feel comfortable deploying the system.
That's exactly right.
Mm.
And oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'm done.
Okay, good.
Oh, I could just add on. I mean, like echoing what you're saying, Michael. There is the speed, but there's also the sophistication benefit.
Mm.
Um, if if we have a tool to test these systems, you can be pretty sure that the attackers have a tool on their end to make their attacks more
Yeah,
sophisticated. So it's almost like a forced adaptation that we think people need to go through to make sure they're
yeah.
up to pace.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, I think that's the part that is, part of the realization and the lack of trust in the security is the fact that that it is such a broad and multifaceted problem. And the more the hacker, the gets the tools that can make them do much more, much faster in really unpredictable ways, the more danger there is. So how do you counter that? Um, we've heard about a lot of the new kind of concepts around, once we've deployed generative AI and agentic AI, things like prompt injection or jailbreaks, and it's still fairly new, but how do you help customers understand, what they really probably don't understand today, the actual level of that risk, and then how can we in general raise the awareness of the market to how we need to shift the way we think about cybersecurity?
Yeah, that's a really important question. We've been thinking about this for a while,
Mm,
and I wouldn't say we have the answer, but I think we have a pretty good approach right now.
mm,
There is definitely a lot of gray area in this space. Even a lot of the, I would say,
mm,
sources of truth of cybersecurity guidance, like OWASP, are still catching
mm,
up to agentic architectures. They haven't published the agent top 10 yet, but they have the LLM top 10.
mm,
So I think just as a baseline, one thing that we can do to have more awareness at the executive and the management level is us, like Eduardo and I, could start contributing more to their open source guidelines
mm,
because we have some experience getting exploits in production systems.
mm,
The The second and main approach for us at educating our customers is a little unorthodox. We actually will hack, in air quotes, the production facing system and
Mm,
find exploits, then disclose them responsibly and publish them to social media or our blog site. And this is the reason why we think this works well is because the consumer is at the forefront of a lot of AI innovation. Like
right.
ChatGPT was adopted by people before it was adopted by
Mm,
businesses. So we want to bring these same people's eyeballs to security. That way, there's a lot more attention on it, and it becomes top of mind for a lot of companies.
mm,
The in terms of the market, think starting from the source of engineering is a good way to build out better security, and that's one of the main reasons why we've taken a more of a developer focused approach. So
mm,
beyond uh, soon open sourcing the entire red teaming framework, also having a more engaged community around
mm,
security is important. So one of the ideas that we're toying with and likely implement in the future is like a hack to give event where you can come in, either use Silmaril or even just do this manually, where we have a list of sponsors or just approved AI tools, and you go through them, you find bugs in them, submit a bug bounty report, and if it gets accepted, then now you have some cash you make from that, and we just match that and make a donation to a charity. So kind of these three approaches are what we're thinking of. Um,
mm.
but I mean, have you noticed any really interesting ways people are getting involved in security? We'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
Well, unfortunately, right now, what I've seen more than anything is the reaction to a problem versus the proactive attack of the problem. Right? That's kind of not atypical, I think, in security. It's almost and data protection, privacy, all these things. It's almost like you had to have the big incident to make me go, oh. I better do something about that, and then that awareness leads down that path. But I mean, huge risks, right? Huge brand risk, huge trust risk as you're trying to go through these. So, I mean, I do think you're right though. Getting people's hands in and getting them to actually participate and understand how they can build security by design, basically from the ground up. That's absolutely key to help understand what they need. So that makes to me that community approach really does make a lot of sense, and particularly in this world where things are evolving so quickly that you have to be able to think ahead and build that in as you're going down this path, or you're going to miss some huge vulnerabilities. So that I think that makes a lot of sense. Um, one of the things that's been interesting to me as I've talked to companies about the use of agentic AI, generative AI, all these different tools, and automation in general, really, is it hits all different size of companies, but in the small to mid-sized company where they're really resource constrained, this idea of automation, autonomous agents, it's a big opportunity for them from a competitive perspective. Now, I'm just curious for what you guys have seen so far. I mean, what size companies are you seeing that are, looking at and using your solution? And then, once they've done that, how do you help them calculate ROI and build out the business case to really support what they're doing in that end, as they go forward with these projects?
Interestingly, it's actually not the size that we found was a good
Mm,
delineator. It was more the risk associated with the system.
mm,
So some systems are more workflow-esque, and they have a different risk profile than, let's say, a full agent that makes decisions.
mm,
So we work with recently, actually, like a Fortune 500 company, and a lot of smaller startups. Um, Kind of what we've noticed is that the main way to quantify security benefits is by looking at like an expected loss aversion calculation, where
mm,
we take the probability of a breach and multiply it by the expected impact.
mm.
And sometimes you can put numbers on it in terms of like
Interesting.
monetary value that could be lost. Other times it's more intangible, like customer trust. Um,
Mm,
but I think that works well, primarily because it's pretty free. Like we can our tool is open source. What we do is we'll just give it to people for free and
mm,
kind of do like a pilot situation where for a week or so they use the tool. We're available to help them understand the metrics, get used
mm,
to running these tests, and just learn about how attackers operate. And then the other approach that we found is helpful is also forward deploying ourselves or engineers in general into working with these teams. So there's a pretty big mindset shift that a lot of engineers at these companies, big or small, need to go through to build security aware products. And
Mm,
thinking like an attacker is pretty much best done by either having a walkthrough by someone or having some sort of detailed documentation that explains how attackers operate. So we'll forward deploy engineers and help these companies really understand how does an attacker view their product. And that helps them build in a lot more security practices as well.
mm. Yeah, it really isn't driven by and I guess that does make sense, right? It's the risk and how you deal with the risk, and the more you've gone down the path of deploying these types of systems, or even putting them proof of concept in place, the more you're aware that you do have this a surface that could easily be attacked, and you need to do something about it. So it's that awareness that drives that makes sense. You know, I'm an old Tolkien nerd, and Lord of the Rings, Hobbit, all those things. I think I probably read them the first time when I was 10 or 11. So for a very long time I've been into this. And when I saw the name of the company, I was like, Silmaril, obviously, magic jewels that contain the light of creation from the Tolkien world. What drew you guys to this, and why does this tie in to your idea around security, and does it connect to your mission in some way?
Yeah, we're fans of Tolkien and the movies. I'm not going to say we're big fans because it sounds like you're an even bigger fan than us. But
Eh.
yeah, that's you pretty much hit the nail on the head with that one. We definitely that was almost an image in our head that we wanted to
Mm,
convey is this sort of this idea of security powering creation, and
yeah.
um, it's almost like illuminating or just shining light on a lot of the problems that companies are having with their pilots. So that level of confidence is something that we kind of associated with this idea of like a gem of light. The
Mm,
other aspect is the the idea of having hands of darkness be revealed or just completely torched by the
mm,
strength of this light, and that's kind of a cool image that we want to aspire to, where not only do we detect these attacks, but we actually just stop them before they affect anything.
mm. Yeah, I love it. That's that is a really great mental picture, right? You use that light of creation to eliminate these dark corners that can really be a risk for business. So I should have used a Tolkien name for my business too. Darn, I didn't think of it.
It's not too late.
Um,
You can always change.
I already got a brand now. What do I do? But it is very interesting. I love it. If we take a step back as we're talking about this, and we look at the broader AI landscape, so it's not just agentic, I mean, although agentic certainly leads the conversation right now, but you've got generative, you've got all the traditional AI in place as well, machine learning and algorithms models that are have been in place for a while even. But what do you see the biggest security challenge as we go forward? What do you think is going to come out, and do you think there are new ways that we're going to find to use AI applications and new use cases that are going to actually create more of a security risk, or make companies more concerned and need to do something?
So we see the emerging risks going far beyond the traditional prompt injection or jailbreak.
Mm,
We've already seen through our work how something as innocent as a calendar invite can lead
mm,
to being able to control a smart home devices
mm,
through an AI assistant that was integrated with those. And that problem only gets more severe. Like you were
mm,
saying, the more integration that these agents have. So
mm,
the way I think about it is the more actions that a model can take on your behalf, the more that an attacker could do if they're able to compromise that model. And
mm,
then also, like you were saying, it even becomes or has an even bigger blast radius with agents and multi-agent architectures coming up. So OWASP, the top agentic risks, I highly recommend checking out. And that lists risks that are a little bit more subtle, things like goal misalignment, where you're basically
Mm,
deceiving a whole system into taking these actions because they don't realize that they're not related to the proper use of an application, or just general flaws in the overall orchestration of how
mm,
agents interact. And what that means is
interesting.
your security is basically the weakest link in that chain.
Mm,
Going beyond that,
mm,
so we're starting to see the emergence of these ambient agents, which operate quietly in the background, and they
yep,
consume sensory data like your from your
mm,
smartwatch, health data, data from a data center, um, or even something like smart home devices as well. And they're operating in mission critical environments, so the stakes are much higher, and naturally, a
mm,
compromise is that much more concerning.
mm,
Going beyond that, we're also seeing the first steps taken toward agents that adapt and learn from their interactions in real time. Google wrote a great paper on this. It's called The Era of Experience. And their
mm,
hypothesis is basically that we're running out of human data to train AI
mm,
on. So, to
mm,
achieve superhuman intelligence, these systems are going to have to generate their own synthetic data
yeah.
based on their experiences that they can learn from. And while that's really powerful, it also means that if an attacker is able to compromise the way that these agents learn, it could extend the reach of an attack far beyond a single event and actually teach the agent a malicious behavior permanently.
Mm,
It's not
interesting.
all bleak, so it's our
Mm,
responsibility to build these agents to learn and collaborate securely, and doing so actually turns those weaknesses that I just mentioned, like being much more integrated and learning over time, into their strengths. For example, an agent
mm,
can learn from interactions with a bad actor to identify these types of attacks
mm,
and actually contain them moving forward. And that's
mm.
what we're aiming for.
Interesting. Yeah, actually, I just did some research on what I called invisible AI and the fact that, we're starting to see these agents appear inside of other processes and systems where they make things happen, but you aren't, it's not as if I'm building a customer service agent that's going to interact with my customers. It's behind the scenes. So in some ways, it's less visible, but it has a great deal of capability and impact because it's connected inside to a lot of different parts of your business. I wonder about that, and then I also wonder, as we deploy more agents, which we're going to do, and you're going to see multi-agent systems grow, and then you also have to worry about the agent to agent communication, especially across platforms, because you're going to, you already seen that some with like Salesforce and Workday, for example. They both have agents. They're working on integrating and having them work together, but then you're going to have that difference and the need to have that connectivity, and the connectivity just opens up more and more and more surfaces to put at risk. So that's interesting. And I think it's something that we don't think of. I mean, obviously we're excited about this, but at the same time, what happens when you start to have agents managing agents and the capability of impacting one of those agents to really corrupt a whole tribe of agents? I can't think of a better word. Yeah, that's a huge difference in how we look at security, because it multiplies the risk greatly. To get to the value you want, you actually are putting it into a much riskier situation, I guess. Interesting.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Hmm. Well, so I'm curious, if we just do a little bit of crystal ball work, or maybe it's a magic wand. If you could change one thing about how the industry is approaching security today, what would that be? And what advice would you give to other startups that are building AI products? That, how do they build this idea of security by design, building it in from day one? How do you get there?
I would really encourage AI security to be more of an always on engineering practice,
Mm,
as opposed to an afterthought that is maybe gatekeeping launches and just results in something that's really inefficient. I would also encourage teams to test their systems in a realistic adversarial
Mm,
way, continuously, starting from the design phase. So mapping out what the different risks are, what the
mm,
controls are, and really building the product from the ground up with security in mind. And by doing so, we would, or we hope to help teams move away from these binary checklists and security theater into
mm,
really building products that make customers confident that the company is really putting their security and privacy at first.
Yeah, and I really echo that,
mm,
Eduardo. I think for startups, a lot of our focus is on adoption and growth. But what we don't realize as co-founders until we actually start working there is um, security is a competitive advantage in a lot of scenarios. So if we make security a constant requirement during development, we're
mm,
giving our customers more confidence in serving their end user, and that helps everyone in the ecosystem. So this
mm,
should really be a goal of startups is to build secure by default systems.
mm. Yeah, that I mean, that resonates with really, with me, the idea that we have to if we're gonna if companies are gonna go forward with autonomous systems and actually use them in an agentic autonomous way, they're gonna have to have a level of trust that goes well beyond what we've seen with systems in the past. So having security inherently in the tools and in the, the agents that you're hiring to work in your business, right? That you're building your digital workforce. If they have security by design, that is going to go a long way to generating trust. So that definitely makes sense to me from a how do I build my product to make it much more effective and have it contribute to this idea of building trust so that I will move into production with these types of systems. Interesting. Well, so that's about all the time we have today. But I always like at the end of any show to ask for some recommendations for the audience. So, do you guys know? Do you have a thought leader or author or podcast, somebody that you think would be really useful for the audience to check out? And that doesn't have to be in the AI security world, but it could be, and maybe that's something that could really help them learn more about what you're doing and what's happening in the security world.
Yeah, for sure. OWASP is actually a pretty good source
Mm,
for executives, CISOs, or just anyone who's pretty new to security in general. They've been around for a while and they have a lot of
mm,
interesting approaches. So I definitely recommend checking out their guidelines. Um, for someone who's a bit more research oriented, like Eduardo mentioned, I think Era of Experience is a good place to start to
mm,
learn about these architectures that are coming up. And then attention is all you need. That's like a paper that I'd also recommend checking out. Um, and then I think the third approach that I'd recommend is following Tom Gallagher. He's
mm,
a VP at Microsoft, and
yeah.
he does a lot of interesting work on red teaming. And the reason why we like him is because he kind of explains the mindset of a red teamer or just an
Mm,
attacker. So his book is pretty relevant. I'd recommend that if you want to learn how these attackers operate. Beyond that, I think the best way to approach this is to really like responsibly find exploits yourselves.
mm,
So of course, like disclaimer, like be responsible, disclose these to the companies. Don't publish any of this unless you've gotten approval. But try messing with these systems, see what you can come up with. That's a pretty good way to learn. And I mean, if you find anything interesting, or if you're just wanting someone to bounce ideas off of for these exploits, like you can always email either one of us or send us a message on LinkedIn. Like we'd love to have these chats kind of randomly as well. So don't hesitate to reach out to us as well.
cool.
Yeah, and please make sure that companies have established vulnerability disclosure programs that offer safe harbor, and make sure you stay in scope. Sorry, I just felt
No,
I
that's a
really
great
wanted to highlight
disclaimer.
that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, so you mentioned some video links that we could share. So if you'll send those to me after, I'll put them in the show notes, and the audience can check that out and see a bit more. I think having some visual really does help as you're trying to understand the threat and how to respond to that. So that'd be really useful. Thanks. And both of you, really, thank you for joining today. Really fun conversation, and very, very timely and interesting. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks
Yeah,
for
we'll
having us.
definitely, yeah, we'll have that over to you. And thanks for the conversation. This is awesome.
Great. And that's the show for this week. Thank you all for joining us. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the show. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a review to help others find us. For more research on AI and other software, check out arianresearch.com. If you're an expert in AI, generative AI, or business automation, either as a provider or an end user, email your information to disambiguation@arianresearch.com. Don't forget to join us next week. Disambiguation is an Arian Research production. I'm Michael Fauscette, and this is the Disambiguation Podcast.